Welcome to the Jazz Vibraphone Q&A. My name is Tim Collins and this is my Jazz Vibraphone YouTube channel. So let's start. Are Vibes and Fender Rhodes piano too similar in timbre to be used in the same group? In New York City there's a jazz club called the 55 Bar and their house piano there is a Fender Rhodes. Vibes and Rhodes and guitar all together definitely are very similar sounds, and to me the important thing is not so much the fact that they do blend well together, but how do you create variation when you have a lot of a similar sound going on. Vibraphone and Fender Rhodes do blend very well. In fact, they sound so similar that when the two are playing it's really easy to clash, so you have to be careful that you're playing voicings that fit together, or, you know, maybe just laying out, taking turns, alternating who's going to comp, this kind of a thing. Who are your favorite vibe players, past or present? The guy that I definitely started modeling myself after when I was first learning to play is, without question, Milt Jackson. I was transcribing his solos, I was trying to emulate his sound, and playing the repertoire that he played. After that, I got into Bobby Hutcherson, and also at this time, Gary Burton and Chick Corea, the duo, was really important to me because that was some of the first music that as a drummer was influential to me. It really showed me how hard you can groove without drums. And I would always think to myself, boy, if I were playing drums along with this record, I would just be subtracting from the groove. When and how to use the inversions in jazz harmonic progressions? Well, that's a voice leading thing, and that has everything to do with the melody. If I have a melody that goes like this, and it's over the key of C minor, I'm going to harmonize it using an inversion of the C minor chord, then maybe a passing diminished chord, then maybe a C minor chord again, then maybe another passing diminished chord, then a C minor chord again with that inversion. And so if you're thinking melodically all the time, it will tell you what inversions you want to use, because comping is also a melodic art form. Can you please bring a light about the CTA chord progression, and if you play I Got Rhythm at a fast tempo on the vibraphone, what do you have in your bag about comping, like Horace Silver comping? Well, first of all, let me address the song. Rhythm changes, CTA goes B flat, A flat, G flat, F. It's like a major version of Hit the Road Jack. And then the bridge, instead of going D, G, C, F, it goes A flat, G, G flat, F. It's basically tritone substitutions from the original rhythm changes. Now Horace Silver, his comping serves the purpose more of setting a rhythmic bed than it does for interacting with the soloist. And this is great because if you know the style that it's meant to be played, when you're soloing, you can be very free because you know the rhythmic propulsion is always going to be there underneath you. And this is what a great comper can do. When did you decide to become a jazz vibes player? When I was 20 years old, between my sophomore and junior year in college. Which jazz musicians influenced you the most in terms of phrasing and soloing? And what is your approach to self-comping and solo arrangement of jazz standards? Second question first. I don't really play that many solo arrangements of jazz standards, but when I do, I don't approach it that differently from when I'm playing with a band. I try to outline all the chords and keep the tempo solid, even within the lines that I play. And every once in a while, I will maybe play a line and then play a chord afterwards so that, you know, you have the feeling that it's like a jazz piano player accompanying themselves. As far as musicians that influenced me the most in terms of phrasing and soloing, I can think back on about 5 or 6 jazz solos that I transcribed. Sonny Stitt on Ray's Idea, Keith Jarrett playing When I Fall in Love on the album Still Live, Milt Jackson playing Moonglow on the album The Big Three with Joe Pass and Ray Brown, Kenny Barron and Stan Getz, the duo album People Time. I transcribed a lot of that. Those albums were all very influential, and I can actually remember certain riffs that I've learned from transcribing them. What books or other information can you recommend about music theory, harmony, and jazz harmony, and how do you practice without vibes? The only book about jazz harmony that I ever used myself is Mark Levine's jazz piano book. So I have David Baker's book as well. As far as practicing without vibes, it's a lot of listening and singing. When I'm driving somewhere, I always have CDs, and I find myself singing the bass lines to songs or the melody. There are a lot of songs that I learned without ever actually practicing them, and it's because I listen to them so much. So if you don't have an instrument, listen to lots of music, and sing along with it. Top 5 jazz standards. How many cats do you have and what are their names? And outside of the jazz world, what's your favorite genre of music? Oh man, my top 5 jazz standards. I can't possibly list those, but I can list some songs that I tend to play a lot at my gigs. One of them is Nobody Else But Me. As far as ballads go, Autumn in New York is one of my all-time favorites, along with Dreamsville. It's all about the contrasts. And there are so many great songs and great melodies that can provide those contrasts. What are my cats' names? I used to have 2. One of them is the most famous Vibes cat, I guess. He sadly passed on in 2017. His name was Eddie. The cat that I have still with me, her name is Würstchen, which is the German word for little sausage. And my favorite genre of music outside the jazz world, I love Rush. I was a huge Rush fan when I was a kid. I also love Carole King. I love Sting. I love Bjork. Basically anything that I can listen to over and over again and I don't get sick of it. Hey Tim, how do you adjust comping with a piano player or a guitarist? Actually, when I was studying, my teacher, who was a guitarist, Steve Brown at Ithaca College, he had some concepts about that. He would talk about what he thought of as the lead comper. I tend to take a back seat if I'm comping or if I'm in a band that has multiple chordal instruments. The thing about guitar and piano is that they have this wide range. They can play chords that sound really full and you can get lots of dense harmonies with that. Looking back on your first few years of becoming a jazz musician, which things do you think were most helpful to practice and which less so? I think the most helpful thing was learning songs and playing them in all 12 keys, and then learning riffs and playing them in all 12 keys. There wasn't really anything that was least helpful. I mean, I guess sort of blind, non-musical, technical practice is, I never felt like I got so much out of that. I would try to take the super technical exercises and turn them into some kind of game, whether it was a melodic game or maybe coming from a scale or using them on a specific chord. I thought that was helpful, but just playing, chromatic thirds going up in half steps or something like this, and then I don't think it becomes productive. Guidelines for classical percussion, how to start learning jazz. I have some classical students here in Munich who are actually professional percussionists in the local symphony, and they have a lot of technical facility on the instrument, but I think the main thing that I always end up working on with them is sort of simplifying, practicing melodic fragments, doing them in all 12 keys, practicing the arpeggios of chords. I think methodical practice like that for musicians that already know how to get around the instrument can be really helpful. When did you start to get into jazz and why did you choose to be a vibes player? I didn't really have the intention of becoming a vibraphone player. I was a drum set player who was forced against my will to take piano lessons from my parents. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Is it bad to transcribe with a keyboard? I am in favor of transcribing without writing it down. Learn it on your instrument. It's not so helpful to transcribe a song that you don't already know what the harmonic structure is. I find it much more helpful if I already know the tune, then transcribe, because you can really see how whoever the soloist is relating their melodies back to the chord. So using a keyboard with transcription, I think, is a great idea. Do you ever audiate lines before you play them, and how do you diagnose a broken bar versus frame noise? I've never broken a vibraphone bar, so for me, it's always frame noise. Yes, I do audiate the lines, not in gig situations for the most part, but I will do it when I'm practicing, or I will practice audiating. So I find that it's not really that easy to sing something that you haven't already played before. So the more you do it, the better you're going to get. It's like learning a language, right? It's hard to say a word when you've never heard the word before. Same thing with melodies. But yes, I do audiate and I do practice doing it and I do work on it and I do ear training stuff, as you've seen on my channel. I think you should be able to do it, but you don't have to do it when you actually play live. 2-mallet comping and using the motor, and how much do I miss baseball? I've been watching lots of old baseball games on YouTube, but 2-mallet comping is cool because it forces you to think more melodically, and playing a simple line can be quite just as effective as comping chords for a soloist. I think it's a great idea, and comping with 1 mallet, why not? Using the motor, I am pro motor. I like to use the motor. I like to vary the speed. Sometimes if I'm in the middle of a gig and I'm just like getting sick of it, I'll just turn it off. I like to do a thing at the end of tunes also where I'll play the final chord and then do a manual vibrato on the instrument to give it just a nice, final touch.